This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's December 7th, 2021. I'm Ross John Fortune. The Biden administration late last month released its Presidential Management Agenda Vision, a document that will precede the full PMA release. It mirrors previous management documents in that it emphasizes modernization and performance, but it also is new in its focus on a few important aspects of the Biden management plan. Employee engagement, for example, is a priority in the document. It commits executives to working with public servants far more effectively in their work of the agencies. Customer service also is a new focus as compared to other PMA documents, with the administration even promising that the federal government will improve on addressing life events and documentation. Our guest today writes that the emphasis on delivering better customer service is a reminder of, quote, who pays the bills and for whom the government exists. Dr. Donald F. Kettl is a professor emeritus at the University of Maryland and the former dean of its School of Public Policy. He's the author of many books, including The Politics of the Administrative Process, Systems Under Stress, and The Next Government of the United States. He has a post on our site right now headlined, Why Biden's Presidential Management Agenda is a Big Deal. After a short break, he'll join me to discuss the Biden-Harris Presidential Management Agenda Vision document.
Discover how BetterUp's world-class coaching, content, and AI technology fuels the growth and success of each of your people to increase peak performance and mission success in the federal government, now and in the future. BetterUp scales far beyond coaching to specialist coaches, group sessions, personalized growth strategies, and the BetterUp community to meet each and every federal employee on their unique journey and fuel their transformation. Learn more at betterup.com.
The Biden-Harris administration released a preliminary Presidential Management Agenda Vision late last month, outlining a few specific topics it will tackle in its administration. The document commits to government administration as previous ones have, while also treading new ground on workforce, customer service, modernization, and other issues. Dr. Donald F. Kettl is professor emeritus at the University of Maryland and the former dean of its School of Public Policy. He's the author of many books, including Escaping Jurassic Government, How to Recover America's Lost Commitment to Competence, System Under Stress, and the Next Government of the United States. He has a post on our site right now headlined, Why Biden's Presidential Management Agenda is a Big Deal. He joins the show now to discuss the Biden-Harris Presidential Management Agenda Vision document. Welcome back to the program.
So good to be with you here, Ross, to have a chance to be able to talk about this.
So this document is a big deal, as you have written. We've talked about it a few times on our show about the specificity of some of the focus in it. We'll start with the buy-in of government managers at the end of the document. They have these lists of signatures. What does that say about the administration's management approach, and what does it say about this presidential management vision?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because it is worth, as you suggest, starting at the beginning by going to the end. The members of the President's Management Council, who are mostly the deputy secretaries and other chief operating officers of the cabinet agencies, all of them signed on to this document. And it's the first time that I can recall that a President's Management Agenda has started out with that kind of broad level support. And that's important. A lot of the criticisms in the past came from the argument that, well, this is all very interesting, but it's stuff being rammed down the throats of the cabinet departments without the departments themselves really buying in. So start from the very beginning with the people who are most responsible for trying to carry things out. Then we're in a position to be able to suggest that maybe there is not only a higher odds of success, at least when it comes to getting the cabinet departments engaged, but it also says something about the administration's basic approach. That is, it's not going to try to take a big bite and then force everybody to chew it. It's to try to work with the cabinet departments and especially with the PMC to be able to move things forward. And it's also an effort, I think, to try to make it real and realistic. There have been complaints in the past that these presidential management agendas were too big or too vague or too unfocused or too little support. And so they start at the beginning with material at the end that really suggests that the members of the cabinet and the cabinet agencies, the chief operating officers, are ready to sign on and make this work.
And the buy-in seems to be such a big part of this, as you mentioned, instead of just shoving it down anyone's throat. The people that are, as you have written about, executing any policy in the government are the rank and file, the federal employees. How does the document focus on federal employees fit within the administration's broader plans for the federal workforce and its management agenda vision?
It's always been the case, of course, that to be real, a presidential management agenda has got to reach down to those on the front lines who are in charge of operating the programs that the federal government produces. But what's different here, I think, is a really explicit commitment to trying to engage the employees of the federal government, to try in particular to connect employee engagement with customer service, and using that to reach across cabinet departments and to reach from the administrators inside the cabinet departments down to individual citizens. So it really suggests two things that are important. One is recognizing the important role of individual managers, and secondly, trying to create a strategy to connect engagement with those managers to the customer service that they produce in a way to try to connect that to be more effective with individual citizens. Those are both pretty big deals, I think, that speak to the way in which the administration is approaching this.
The emphasis on customer service is sort of an interesting aspect of this document, and one that's something of a new focus. What this is a two-part question, I guess. Why is that so important, and why haven't previous presidential management agendas had as much on customer service, and how do they connect, I guess?
Yeah, and that's such a great question. The idea of customer service has been out there and been a part of presidential efforts for a very long time. You look back to the Reinventing Government movement during the Clinton administration, and customer service was an important part of what it is that they wanted to do in reinventing government. But as subsequent editions of presidential management agendas have been rolled out, they've been much more focused on issues having to do with measurement, having to do with performance outcomes, having to do with either stoplights or the effort to try to define a very large array of different kind of goals that the administration was seeking to achieve. And so what we see here is a kind of effort to go back and to try to connect with citizens, in part because there's an argument underlying all this that the key to trying to strengthen trust in government has to do with engaging employees to serve citizens better, and in part to try to make sure that there's a kind of cross-cutting effort on this across the government. Now, one of the problems that always comes up when you start talking about customer service in the federal government is that there are large numbers of employees and managers and leaders who say, well, that's really good for, say, Social Security or for the TSA, but we're sitting in there, we're either managing contracts, we're looking at the budgets, we're operating human resource issues, we're dealing with a whole bunch of things where we don't really have customers, we don't deal directly with citizens. And there's, I think, a conscious effort in what the administration is proposing here to try to reverse that kind of thinking, to try to suggest that every federal employee has a customer, whether it is dealing directly with citizens on the one side or supporting those who do. It's making sure that federal employees go to work in the morning with a sense of how what they do connects to what it is that citizens want. And it's an effort to try to make that connection, which I think really separates this from some of the other efforts of customer service that have occurred in the past.
Yeah, you wrote that the convergence of the employees and engaging them in customer service is a, quote, quantum leap in management strategy. Can you kind of expand on that, sort of to follow up on your previous answer?
Sure, because in the past, we've seen a series of different kind of management agenda points, and maybe improving contract management or performance metrics. They've been really approached in relatively insular ways. The administrations have never intended that, but that's in fact the way in which things have often happened. But what we see here is first, a focus on a very small number of cross-cutting points. And secondly, an effort to try to engage each individual employee in this. And third, to try to use a kind of interesting connection between customer service on the one side and employee engagement on the other, which really separates this apart. It means that, for example, if I'm a contract manager, what matters is not only that I manage those contracts well, but that I do my part to try to ensure that the entire system serves citizens in the end. If I'm working on the procurement of information technology systems, it may be that I want to make sure that when it comes time for supporting the IT that goes into TSA checkpoints, that what I do contributes to a better experience for citizens. Ultimately, everything that the federal government does connects back with those who pay the bills. And that's citizens out there. And if what it is the government does doesn't connect well, then citizens are not going to trust government. And on the other hand, if the federal government wants to try to build trust in the government, the way to do so is to try to make those kind of connections on the customer service angle, and that having everybody involved. So engaging employees on the one side to promote customer service on the other is really one of the fundamental pieces of the management agenda. But that kind of connection in terms of trust, which is the underlying theme of all this, is something that really is very important.
Equitable services and improving the federal acquisition and financial management systems are other focuses of the document. How is that different or similar to previous presidential management agendas and their plans?
Some of these, I think, are familiar and have been the subject of lots of improvement over time. I think that whether it's shared services and the effort to try to improve procurement by figuring out who it is who really needs to buy what, trying to think about the ways in which the financial management systems can be improved. There's, I think, a sense that these are old chestnuts in a way, but old chestnuts that need to be something that's a project of continual work. But there's also a sense now, since there really only are three big things with customer service and hiring employees and engaging employees, and then ultimately these cross-cutting managerial support functions, that these are all to be woven together as one piece. And so that the underlying assumption is that these all matter in helping to try to help the government do its job. Everything from security clearances on the one side to improvements in financial management on the other. I mean, all of them are important in trying to make sure that in the end, government works better, that it can serve citizens better, and that it can find ways of trying to save money. And it's worth pointing out as well the fact that this is a pretty substantial collection of different ideas, but they all can be done without having to go to Congress and look for new legislation. So it's the importance in many ways of being able to advance the ways in which the federal government is being managed without having to wade into the enormous battles between Republicans and Democrats on the Hill, so that the administration is not hung up in its efforts to try to launch these improvements in the way in which federal management operates.
So I guess we'll end on this. You write that it is a big deal. We'll start with the question, why is it such a big deal? And then to sort of follow that, what does it say about the administration's management style? And what does it say about the strategy about what the Biden administration wants to accomplish with regards to things like the infrastructure bill and its agenda?
Yep. And it's important to note that there have been some times where previous presidential management agendas have either elicited a big yawn from the federal government community, or an effort to try to create some headlines, but then people in the agencies have tried to figure out, well, how does this really affect me? Or maybe it doesn't affect me. Maybe it's threatening, and I want to just try to push it aside. What's important here is that it really represents not only a connection among these three elements, but an underlying management philosophy. It's that government has lost the trust of citizens, that the way to try to rebuild trust is to try to focus on improved customer satisfaction. And there's a lot of evidence that supports that the way to try to support the improved customer satisfaction is by having more engaged employees, and that ultimately creating better management systems to be able to make that happen is something that's essential for making all of that work. And so you put all this together, it's really a very big deal, in part because it has this sharp focus It's not just top down, it's not just bottom up, but it's an effort to try to build partnerships. It engages employees, it focuses employees on why what they do matters, and it is an effort to try to improve the overall operation of the federal government. And so what's different is, and why it is a big deal, is that it has not only these connections, but reflects an underlying management philosophy focused very squarely on improving trust in government, with a philosophy about how it is that could be done. So to step back and look at that, there are a few things more important than trying to rebuild trust. And the administration has an idea about how it is that they think it best could be done.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, particularly if a larger presidential management agenda sort of document, as this PMA vision thing seemed to be more of a preceding document. Yeah, it seems like a very big deal. And Dr. Kettl, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
It's so good to be with you again.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler and hosted by me, Ross John Fortune. We want to thank Dr. Donald Kettl for joining the program. Our music is a song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter @govexec. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.
Discover how BetterUp's world-class coaching, content, and AI technology fuels the growth and success of each of your people to increase peak performance and mission success in the federal government, now and in the future. BetterUp scales far beyond coaching to specialist coaches, group sessions, personalized growth strategies, and the BetterUp community to meet each and every federal employee on their unique journey and fuel their transformation. Learn more at betterup.com.